The Stanley Cup final is winding down, but why does it take so long to play one series? We'll talk about that, the initial 6 picks for the Olympics, and a lot more, all on today's Squad Show.
You are talking puck with the NHL Squad Show, sponsored by Game Time. From the Oilers to the Stars, Golden Knights, and the Panthers, the Rangers, Avalanche, and yes, even the Maple Leafs. The Locked On Podcast Network brings together all its local experts to provide the scoops, breakdowns, and comprehensive looks at all the NHL, with plenty of trash talk to go with it. Don't miss the hard hits and glove-dropping hot takes on the Locked On NHL Squad Show. It's time to drop the puck.
Gil Martin here, and welcome everybody to the NHL Squad. Sit back, grab your favorite beverage, and join us as we get you ready for another wild week across the National Hockey League. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. We have got a great crew assembled today. We have Seth Toupal of Locked On Wild, David Morassutti of Locked On Leafs, and Zach Martin of Locked On Hurricanes here. And a great time of year. Guys, we know that the Stanley Cup final has been going on for a long time now. I'm loving the hockey. I'm loving the way the series is entertaining as someone who doesn't have a dog in this fight. But should it take more than 2 weeks to play a Stanley Cup final round?
It's so it's not done yet. I wonder how the players feel about it too. Like just how long it takes. It doesn't make it any easier for if somebody's getting a little banged up, they get an extra day or two to recoup. It's yeah, but also just keeping them playing for 3 weeks doesn't really help either. I get it. The travel's tough, but it's more so I think where the season ends and where the playoffs begin and how long they continue through. That's really become such a sore spot for a lot of fans.
Well, and that too. I mean, we look at it last year. The cup final was done on a Monday. Draft was that same week, and then right into free agency. There was no in between. And I understand with rest and TV rights and stuff like that too, and travel. But at the same time, you had that really long break between the conference final games. Then you get 2 or 3 days in between these other games as well. Yeah, it's just you're dragging this out so much longer. And The Athletic even put out, why are the views down 25%? Well, it's because you've dragged this on for so long and so many days in between. Fans are kind of just all right, when's the next game, I guess? And that's just the problem that they're having right now. It's just taking forever.
Yeah, Zach, I think you hit on the biggest area that the NHL could trim off of this is the amount of time between each round. And I know that's done the way they do that is, well, let's assume that all these series go game 7, and then we'll add some time in addition to that. Yeah, that's all well and good, but what happens if those series go 4 games or 5 games? Then all of a sudden you've got just this long dead period of nothing. And I understand wanting to have a proper buffer so that if there is a team that goes 7, they're not having to immediately flip over and dive into a series against a team that is more rested. But it's playoffs is a gauntlet. We should just be getting at this point in the year, the only 2 things that are competing for attention are the NBA Finals and the Stanley Cup Final. Major League Baseball is just starting the season. They're doing their thing. They really don't care. They're not trying to compete with the viewership here. And you see the same thing in the NBA Finals. They have 3 days in between each game. It's absolutely unnecessary. A day off in between is perfectly fine. If you are going to travel to the other site, maybe you go 2 days in between there, but there really is no need to have any more than just a day off in between the games. That's plenty of time for people to rest up, for people to, ice their bruises. And I think if you ask the players too, they would much rather be playing. They would much rather be recovery day, right back on the ice, as opposed to, do you have two recovery days? You're not really going to go anywhere because you're in the Stanley Cup final. Like, you're not going to go, oh, we're going to go day trip somewhere. Like, you're trying to win a cup. Like, just cut the time down in between the games. And I think people would be more inclined to watch because the action just continues.
And what does it do? And I think it kind of cuts both ways, and it is equal for both teams. But what does it do for momentum from the perspective of the players? You win a big emotional overtime game, and then you sit for 3 days and wait for the next game. And I think that momentum also has an effect on the fans who want to see the next game after an exciting, game 4 goes into overtime. We want to see what happens next, and you got to wait.
And we get, look at the biggest storyline between the games that we've seen so far in this series. It's, who are the Oilers going to start in net? Because everything else gets played out over the course of 2 days. So you really have no choice. If the Oilers don't name a starter, then that becomes your A topic for an entire day's worth of coverage.
Yeah. And like you said, Seth, for between round 2 and the Eastern Conference Final, Hurricanes got done in 5 games. Florida went to 7, and then it was like that Monday off, and then immediately game 1 was Tuesday. That's how quick it was. And yeah, you look at that, then you look where it is now for the Cup. It's just so long. And now, like you said, turns into who's the starter for game 6. Oh, let's go over the Dairy Queen story for the 7th time because that's the biggest thing. I'm so glad those guys are having a night out, getting some blizzards and some upside down ice cream cones. Yeah, it gets to a point where it's like, can we just get to the hockey? As soon as the Cup final's over, we all know what's going to be next: draft, free agency, stuff like that. Let's just wrap this thing up. Let's get ready for the next big event because we don't need to keep rehashing the same stories over and over and over again to kill time.
And then, look, there's also already been murmurs of expansion. And believe me, if they add 2 more teams, they're going to add a play-in playoff round. So is the Stanley Cup going to be awarded July 4th next year? Or
No.
2 years, 3 years? How does this all fit together eventually?
And it's funny that when they constantly ask Gary Bettman or Bill Daly about this, no, we're not going to do that. We think our playoffs are great as it is. And it's but there's now you're going to have, and I get it. With the NBA, the way they do it, it's quick. It feels like, okay, 2 games, bing, bang, and you're done, right? It's not like a whole tournament that you have to do. I think maybe it gets misrepresented in how it actually would happen, but it's how are you going to tell 2 more teams you get to come into this league, pay billions of dollars in expansion fees to do it? Oh yeah, but you're not going to get any. We're not changing the playoff structure in any way to accommodate the fact that we're going to add more teams to it. Eventually, you're going to get to the point where it's going to like the World Cup, where you're just going to be adding all these teams, and then it's okay, but it doesn't really solve the issue of how many teams are actually going to find success in moving forward, right? Because these teams need the playoff revenue. There's some teams that need the playoff revenue to justify what they're going to be spending each and every year on salaries and everything else.
And it's not just the playoff revenue. It's if you add, additional teams to a play-in round, there are more teams in March and April with hope of making the playoffs, and you sell more tickets during the regular season as a result of that as well. And keep in mind, it's been 16 teams in the NHL playoffs since 1979, I think, give or take a year or two. So, and back then there were 21 teams and 16 of them made the playoffs. So they are due to add, but you would have to condense it. You couldn't space out the Stanley Cup final the way they're doing if they add a play-in round.
Well, if they added a play-in round too, though, here's the flip side. Then you're kind of diminishing the regular season because at that point, are you really making it worthwhile for these teams that are, maybe shouldn't be in the playoffs, but it's we can make it in, and we just gotta finagle our way into a certain amount of points and stuff like that. And it's just and that's why I think a lot of people are kind of against the NBA for doing it, because now they have too many teams getting in, and then it's just expanding it more. It makes it longer, and it kind of diminishes. Why are we trying for 82 games to have 18, 20 teams make the playoffs, and then it just elongates a process that's already tough as it is, and it makes these guys play more hockey games on top of that, where it's already long as it is.
Well, and think about this too, just from a league perspective. So the Stanley Cup final is done this week. You're June 20th is that's you're done. The draft is next week. Free agency is like 4 days after that. And then you got nothing until the start of the season, until teams come back for training camp. Wouldn't you want to make those events two like separate things that draw attention to the league, as opposed to just kind of this blob of coverage that extends from the few days leading up to the draft? It just continues into free agency. Like, I would think you would want to try to drum up some buzz. And if you, like, let's say the Stanley Cup final is done by the early part of June, you have the draft in the middle of June, you still have the free agency and everything start July 1st. Now you've got like 2.5 weeks of buzz that you can generate for your league, as opposed to just, hey, draft, free agency, just throwing it all on a table and saying, here you go.
And like how few teams maybe could make potential moves, because draft 2 days later, free agency, and it's like, well, that's not enough time for us to consider making a move or two that we may have wanted to do. Now, the draft is usually when you make your big moves, but we've even noticed like even the draft hasn't had the bigger impacts in terms of trades. Just teams just don't have as much time to really formulate. Like, trades take a while to get done. Some do come up, the negotiations start a lot earlier and they pick up again. But with the way that the offseason just gets condensed, you don't see that movement that you normally will see in other leagues, especially like in the NBA, where it feels like you got so much time to kind of gather everything together, and you do see those big moves happen.
And on top of it, this year, the GMs will not all be in the same place at the draft. So that's going to make trade negotiations a little bit harder, I would think. Not, modern technology, yeah, but having everybody together for a weekend in the same place, I think, does help trade talks move along. All right, we've got to move along as well. We've got a lot more to discuss, including possibly closing one of the most infamous loopholes in the NHL. We'll talk about that and more coming up next on the Squad Show. Today's episode is brought to you by Wonderful Pistachios. Looking for a snack that's both delicious and nutritious? Crack into a good source of protein with Wonderful Pistachios. Wonderful Pistachios is one of the highest protein nuts. Each 1 ounce serving has 6 grams of protein, giving you over 10% of your daily value. Plus, they're packed with fiber and better for you unsaturated fats to help keep you feeling fuller longer. Personally, I love the no-shells variety. It's the perfect grab-and-go snack for busy days. Whether I'm snacking at my desk, on a road trip, or just need a quick protein boost, they're always my go-to. And if you love cracking open every shell for that satisfying crunch, the in-shell options are a classic favorite. So get snacking and get cracking with the snack that packs a protein punch. Visit wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more. That's wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more. So we've seen this happen far too often in the last 5-10 years in the NHL, where a team acquires a player at the deadline after stashing a very talented and high salaried player on LTIR. And then magically, when the playoffs start, everybody's healthy and everybody's back. And all of a sudden, a team has a roster in the playoffs that is way above what the cap would be during the regular season. There's some talk about closing that potential loophole. I think it's a good idea, but what do you guys think? And how should the league proceed with this?
Yeah, I think it's definitely time to get rid of the ability to basically just blank check yourself into the playoffs. I mean, the examples that we've seen over the past few years, I go back to Nikita Kucherov with the Tampa Bay Lightning, where he missed basically the entire season. And then all of a sudden, oh, hey, yeah, he's feeling great. We're optimistic that we're maybe going to be able to get him onto the playoff roster. And then he leads the team in points. They win the Stanley Cup. End of story. Mark Stone's done it a few times with the Vegas Golden Knights. That has kind of become a running joke to the, like, it's been done enough that they've turned it into a running joke with Mark Stone. Like, get your 20 games in to start the season, then take it easy and come back for the playoffs. It is something that I think needs to be tightened up and taken care of completely, because, you know, you have teams that may, like the Wild were in a situation this year where they had Kirill Kaprizov on long-term injured reserve, and a lot of Wild fans were like, how come we're not doing this because other teams have done it? Well, in the Wild's case, they wanted to still be able to get Kirill Kaprizov on the roster before the regular season ended to make the playoffs. So they had to have that money free to be able to get him back on the roster. They absolutely could have benefited from going and getting a bona fide top 6 player. I think if you can get somebody to put into that lineup in the top 6, I think they would have beaten the Golden Knights in round 1. But that opportunity only exists if you allow teams the ability to supersede the cap. And if not everybody's going to do it, get rid of it. If it's going to be taken advantage of by a couple of teams that exploit it, cut it, get it out of there.
Well, you look at the past Stanley Cup final winners, right? The first time it really became a thing was when Patrick Kane went down with the injury, that they said, oh, you know what? Throw him on LTIR. Now Chicago was able to add a bunch of guys. Kane came back. They went on to win the Cup final. Nikita Kucherov, he had the hip surgery that kept him out all year, but conveniently was able to come back for game 1 of the Stanley Cup final. They went on and won that one too. Vegas did the same thing, as you said, with Mark Stone, and Florida this year with Matthew Tkachuk, right? I don't see how we can say that in today's NHL, and Gary Bettman has talked about how the salary cap has brought parity to the league, and then teams are like, well, here's the thing, Gary. We don't think that because we can exceed the cap by 8, 10. In some cases, I've seen like $18 million with LTIR usage. How are teams supposed to compete with that? Like, it was brought up in Toronto. Why didn't Austin Matthews sit out, when he was dealing with his injury, so that the Leafs could add a bunch of players? Well, one, Austin Matthews didn't want to do that because he wanted to play. 2, if the Leafs did it, the NHL probably would have said something about it because it's Toronto. And 3, it'd be so blatant for a team like that to do it that it would probably ruin it for everybody else. So all the other teams will complain too. It's like, well, if you go and do it, I don't think we'll ever be allowed to do this again. I just think that we need to stop with this whole the hard salary cap has brought parity to the league, because teams have found ways around it, and it's not that there's way too many disadvantages are being thrown out for teams. It's not a level competing field right now, and I don't know how Get Bettman and Bill Daly could come out and say it's not that way.
Yeah, well, and you're right, David, because you look at Florida, you just mentioned it too. Like, they don't have Matthew Tkachuk after 4 Nations. He comes back, but in that time frame, you go get Brad Marchand and Seth Jones in that lineup. So now your defense just got better, and now you add a guy who's been there in Marchand, and now you get Matthew Tkachuk back. Now it's almost like you have a top 9 that pretty much beats almost an entire team's roster, because it's just loaded with all these guys. So that's why you've seen teams like Florida can just breeze their way through a playoff. I know Toronto took them probably farther than anyone else has in the Eastern Conference, but that's just one of the crazy things of how it's worked out. Like you said, it's just all these teams are loopholing their way into these rosters. It almost gives the feel of this loophole is the pre-salary cap era, where you see like the Red Wings, the Avalanche, all those teams that were able to load up with, superstar teams because there was no cap. You can just go and just get guys, and then you have the mega teams. That's what it almost feels like with this loophole. And like you see, all these other leagues don't really want you to do that, and for whatever reason, the NHL has exploited it, but not everyone does it. And that's where you see a handful of teams consistently have deep playoff runs because they do that loophole. And the thing is, some of the teams who exploit it even try to vote it out the first time in the CBA. They're like, well, we don't want it, but you kept it. Okay, we're going to show you. And they did it, and that's why they've won. They exploited the rule that they were trying to vote out the first time to prove to the league, okay, if you don't want to, then let us show you why it's going to not work for you.
Yeah, but keep in mind, here's a different tack to it. It allows, look, even when a guy is on LTIR, they don't count against the cap, but you still have to pay them. So the richer teams are going to have a big advantage because, you know, small market teams or teams that are not willing to spend the extra $8, $10, $12 million on salary are not going to be able to load up and do this. Whereas your Torontos or your Vegases or teams that have the money and are willing to spend it, you know, they can do it. So it does create inequality. The question is, how do you best solve it? Do you institute a cap in the playoffs? Do you limit the use of LTIR? Or if a guy is on LTIR, he can't come back for the playoffs? How do you fix this problem?
I think if you're going to try to activate someone from LTIR, like the current rules state that they have to be away from 10 games in 24 days. Like both those conditions need to be met, which a lot of teams are able to do. But I also think you got to find a way to do, if you're bringing them back, they can't just be activated and brought back. There needs to be a process that, okay, we're going to activate them and there's going to be some sort of, like how the NFL does it with a designation to return, right? Baseball sort of does it in that way too, where they do the different designations. Like, I think you got to have a proper way to do those designations. And I don't know, maybe in the playoffs, you got to also figure out you can't exceed the cap by X% when a player is brought back from LTIR. You can't just bring back an entire player back. Like only some of it is variable in the playoffs. Something along those lines. You can't do a salary cap in the playoffs. I get it because they don't get paid. But you got to find a way to say, if this is your cap, you can't go over it by a certain percentage in the playoffs. And maybe that's the way it goes now. Okay, we can place the guy on LTIR, but only this much of it can be placed on it. So we have to figure out a way to be cap compliant and have this guy be able to play.
I really like the IR designations as a way to kind of combat this, because the NFL has, you know, they have the ones that you can put players on if you've got the PUP list before the season starts, so you can put them on that list if they're going to miss the first handful of weeks of the season, and then they can come back sometime before that cutoff. And then during the season, you've got, you know, the short term and the long term, or the season ending, and you have a limited number of spots that you can put each of the players in each of those cases. So let's say Mark Stone's going to miss 2 months. You know, you can designate him to return, but he has to return by that set cutoff time. If he doesn't, then he's not eligible to return for the rest of the season. I think that would go a long way towards curtailing some of this.
Well, yeah, because that's what baseball does, because they have the 7-day, the 10, the 15, and the 60. And like you said, you only put so many guys on those designated lists. And like you said, if this guy's for 60 days, okay, then this is the date he has to be back activated on your roster. And yeah, while we know baseball doesn't really have a salary cap, but the NHL has a salary cap, it's okay. You have until, let's say, you know, March 15th. This guy's coming back. Get your roster aligned to where if you bring him back, then you're going to be cap compliant. If not, then you got to make moves to make it work. And that's where you get all your cap compliance guys, and whatever franchise has that guy, that the math nerd who punches the numbers in to be like, okay, this is what we need to fix it. So yeah, I think specific designation of how many weeks, games, or however many that is he's out for. Here's your set date. Figure it out before then. If not, go make some roster moves. And I think, yeah, what David said, let's say the max is like you can go 5 to 6 million over because the cap's 95.5 next year. Okay, then you can't exceed it by $101.5 million. That's it. There's your 6 million that you can go over for the playoffs. It's not a salary cap, but this is what you can exceed past to off of what our designated physical cap for the regular season is.
It does make sense. Let's see if this gains momentum. I think they've got to do something, and we'll see what it is. Meanwhile, we have the announcement of the first 6 players for the various Olympic teams coming up next year. We'll talk about that and more next on the Squad Show. So Canada, the U.S., Sweden, and Finland have all named their first 6 players for the 2026 Olympics. And guys, I mean, some people are getting all bent out of shape about this. It's only the first 6. There's still a lot of spots left. What's your take on these announcements?
I mean, it's always weird to announce 6 players, right? Because it's never really ever done like that in the past. It was always, here's the roster, here's the full list. But I get why they're doing this. This kind of gives a bit of anticipation now, right? You're not waiting until January or end of December, January for an announcement. But I like how people lose their minds on the 6 players announced, and it's like, well, but how about this guy? I'm like, 6 players. We're not talking about 8, 10, 15, 6. And usually the 6 that get picked are the 6 majority of people have on their preliminary list to be on the team in the first place.
And that too, I mean, you look at this is the first time we're going to have NHL guys back on the Olympics since 2014. So yeah, they want to drum up a lot of attention because, oh look, we finally have the best on best for the first time in 12 years when they're going to be in Milan and Kocha out for the first time in a while. So yeah, they're going to do that. And like you said, David, the first 6, it's not like you're going to have all the other big names are going to be off this list. Like I know with, you look at the Carolina Hurricanes, Jacob Slave didn't make it. Oh, why isn't he not there? And, why is Charlie McAvoy? And it's not Slave for what he did in 4 Nations. And it's like, but he's going to make the roster regardless. If there are certain guys that performed really well in 4 Nations, it's going to be a foregone conclusion they're probably going to make the roster. Same thing for Zach Werenski of Columbus. He finished top 3 in the North, but that's a different conversation. But he's going to be there. He's automatic. And, some people are like, what about JJ Peterka from Germany? Well, his contract's not figured out, but obviously he's going to be there too. And you just name all these other guys that are going to make it. For me, it's like, I don't see what the big deal is. It's like you said, David, it's 6 guys. It's not like it's the whole roster. Like there's no snubs. Like it doesn't matter if they're the first 6 or they're the final, whatever the roster size is, 20, 23 or whatever it is. The guys are going to be on it regardless. It's just we're drumming up interest to be like, hey, the NHL guys are back. It's best on best. Let's get excited for it. That's all this really is.
I'm going to echo what I said on the Tuesday episode of Locked On NHL on this. And I don't think the NHL did enough for this announcement because it is a return to the Olympics. I think they should have taken a hint from what they did with some of the awards presentations and turned them into, social media opportunities. And I think what the NHL should have done is you take like one player from each roster and you just do this series of videos where that player goes and gets the next player on the roster and those 2 go and get the next player on the roster. And you just, you lean into some of the, stuff that's going on around the league. Like for Team Canada, let's say you've got Nathan McKinnon sitting in the Avs arena, just, taping up his stick or whatever. And all of a sudden Sidney Crosby walks in and says, boy, we've been talking about doing this for a long time, huh? Avs fans are going to lose their minds because there's been so much speculation that Sidney Crosby is going to join up with McKinnon at some point. Like, turn it into a big deal as opposed to just here's your initial 6, here's the rest of the roster. Like, turn this into something big that sets it all the way up to the start of the Olympics. I think the NHL kind of missed the boat here. I mean, it is the initial 6, so there's plenty of reaction that we've seen, but this should have been a way bigger deal.
Oh, so you're saying they should have D2 the Mighty Ducks where there's rollerblading and going to get everyone? That's what they should have done.
Let's go. Let's go. What a call is that?
But like that Crosby McKinnon, like Avs fans would lose their minds if they did a video like that, just kind of cryptic. And then people are like, oh, it's the Olympics. It's not Crosby's not coming here. Oh man, that heart attack was for nothing. I don't know. I feel like the league kind of missed the mark on a lot of this stuff. And social media is where everybody consumes their news nowadays, and you're seeing more and more sports teams trying to be creative and fun with how they announce things. I think the NHL should have done something like that for this.
Well, is it more the NHL? Is it more the federations, like Hockey Canada, USA Hockey? Like you're right, Seth. Like I think if you're trying to make the not even grow the sport, but just to do things a little differently, like you could have just easily have done like a roster reveal.
Yeah.
Instead of just saying, here are the guys. Like, really? We're in 2025. The NFL, every year the schedule comes out and you're waiting for that team that does that super creative reveal or the very controversial reveal. Not going to name any teams right now. But like, again, just you don't even need to involve the players. You could just do it in a fun, creative way within your own organizations. I do feel like it's just so simple to say, let's just put a graphic out. It's just like everyone does that.
Yeah.
Maybe for the final rosters, maybe listen to the squad show federations and try to get some a little creative with what you do out there.
Yeah, I didn't think I would devote time to talking about the Chargers schedule reveal, but then I guess I didn't feel like I didn't anticipate that the Minnesota Wild were going to catch a stray in the schedule reveal. Like, it's just fun stuff like that you don't expect to have happen is how you generate the buzz.
Yeah.
So what you're saying is we need to get the LA Chargers media team to come out with an anime type of deal to be like, all right, here's your roster, and it's just everyone just flying in or skating in or whatever.
Please no Minnesota Wild banners though. Please.
Just make it fun. Just make it fun.
Yeah.
All right, that is going to do it for us today. I want to thank everyone for making the Squad Show your first listen today. For your second listen, check out the Locked On NHL podcast. There is no off season. We're bringing you daily league-wide stories that matter most with the local coverage you love from Locked On. Find Locked On NHL on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm Gil Martin on behalf of Seth Toupal, David Morassutti, and Zach Martin. Thanks so much for watching and listening today. Have a great week, and we'll be back next week with more of the Squad Show.